All right, welcome everyone on Zoom and in the room for the panel discussion today. We've been very fortunate to be able to get a great panel to discuss an important issue on voting for domestic migrants. All of us have been sensitized to the issue of internal migration, specifically since the pandemic. And the pandemic did provide impetus to refocus on many policy measures that had been worked upon before the pandemic for migrants. And for instance, the one nation, one ration card, which actually was already, very much out there as a policy before the pandemic, we got impetus to take it forward. And similarly, this move by the Election Commission to push the needle on domestic migrants and voting with sort of a rationale to maximize participation in elections seems to be ticking the right boxes in terms of the migrant inclusion agenda as well. So we have a great panel today. We have an ex-Director General of the Election Commission of India, Mr. Akshay Raut, with us today. Thank you so for joining us. We have Dr. Ashwini Kumar from TIS, who has long been working on this specific agenda and has actually provided the research backing for a lot of these decisions to go forward. We have Sanjay Rousey from Workers Unity, who's going to represent the issue of unorganized workers and migrants on this panel. And we have my colleague Rahul Verma, who is a fellow with us here at CPR. So let's get right into it. People can put their questions in the Q&A box or in the chat box, and we'll try and take it up after the first round of discussions has concluded. Mr. Raut, let me start from you and sort of just to get into the issue itself. What's the motivation behind, what is the EC's motivation behind doing this? And what's the mechanism going to be? So if you just lay it out for us first, like how is it actually going to happen? As of now, what do we know about this issue? I think it'll help us all to get on the same page.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a delight to be a part of this discussion because this is important. This is important not only for the people who are in the Zoom and in the room, but I think for the whole country. And if I'm allowed to say, for the direction that the electoral democracy is taking in India. And Mukta, it's not, this is one thing, definitely it's not pandemic induced or pandemic given impetus. I think this is in terms of deep thinking for Indian elections and democracy. If you're allowing me time, I will take 2 minutes to go back into history a little bit. When we started, it all started in 1951, just after the Constitution was framed. We are going to celebrate the Constitution tomorrow. And interestingly, we had the National Voters' Day today because the Election Commission of India is the only institution or the organ of the state which was set up one day prior to the Constitution. That shows the importance that the founding fathers gave to elections in this country. Having said that, and it was pretty daring, and in fact, it was a bold, at the same time, wise action on the part of constitutional father to give universal adult suffrage in everyone's hand. A lot of countries, Western democracies included, have given it step by step to various stratas of population, giving them the chance to vote. But in India, it all happened in one stroke, whether you had 16% literacy only, whether you had immense poverty, whether you are just out of the trauma of transition, the partition, and you are trying to settle yourself as a country, but still the whole population, irrespective of their caste, religion, creed, and everything, gender, they were given this power to vote. It was not bad in 1951 when it all started, because 47% people voted still in almost, you can say to some extent, an unprepared country. And of course, the electorate was only 17 crores. And now the election, as today, the figures released as of today, we are 95 crores. And we are moving towards, say, 1 billion electorate, which is the combination of maybe continents. So the size is something which is mind-boggling. That's one. And at the same time, the Election Commission focused on the issue of people-centric election. I hope I am allowed to say that by the present range of election managers. Always free, fair elections, each time, on time, every time. And that has happened. And credible election to the extent no stakeholders disputed it. Okay. But if from the time I have been associated with the whole election process, there is a question kept coming in over the last 1 decade. We have a democracy deficit. I think this can be used in a phrase called democracy deficit because we had a 50, 55%, 60% turnout. So we had 40% people of the electorate missing. And mind you, not every citizen who needs to be on the electoral list is on the electoral list. No, we had a shortfall in registration, and those who registered, we had a 40% shortfall in turnout. So this was no great story of democracy. I mean, we say largest functional democracy, great. I think technically it's correct. But if that is the level of, and mind you, in the meantime, the number of contestants in each election, in each constituency was growing all the time. So we have less participation, more candidates. So finally, the person who gets elected represented only a minuscule percentage of the whole electorate, not to talk of the population. It was not a great story. It is technically a correct story because some election managers whom I call purists, they believe that, okay, we get the machine, get the forces, secure the polling station, and give people the right to vote, and they come and vote. If they don't come, it's all right. I said, what sort of game it is? No spectators, no players, only umpire is standing, you know. Even if one person votes, it's fine. I don't think that that is correct. So there was a huge discussion inside Election Commission of India at one point, about a decade and a little more back, that no, this is not a good story. Let's build a good story of democracy truly, which is people-centric. Let us get engaged with people. So it started, and all of you have seen, because many of you, I think, are the younger generation as well. For the last 10 years, the turnout has increased, seriously increased. In state election, national election, we have gone to from 55, 60, we have gone to 67%, 66% dramatic in 2014, 1% more in 2019. So there has been result in by trying a conscious effort to connect with people, to get engaged with them. So that raised the aspiration. I took my little time to complete the story so that I thought it will be a reasonably complete story. So now this raised the aspiration of election managers, people in general, the civil society, and those who wish well for democracy. Then, okay, now we have come to 67%, and this is a record. 66% was a record. And the gender gap closing from 4-6% gap to 1.5% gap, and no gap in 2019 is a record. Yeah. But the aspiration has been raised. The participation aspiration has been raised. So where are the 300 million which are missing? Where are the 30 crore? Earlier, 40 crore missing. Now, where are the 30 crore missing? In that missing, three things come. Typically, I have great sociologists and urban experts on my all sides. I'm sure they will be able to reflect on that more. But election managers found, the Election Commission of India, and some of us who were associated, three big reasons for the 300 million missing out from the electorate. One, urban apathy. People in urban areas have been voting less. They are not interested. They want to talk. They want to be seen. They want to, make points here and there. But polling station, perhaps for some reason, they are not very connected. The youth, which has, of course, improved quite a bit. The one segment which has improved massively because of these efforts is women. Women, that is massively improved. I think, evidentially. But the youth remains still an area, because youth have been connected, but not to the extent their numbers represent. They have not been. So that is, youth disconnect is one. And the third one, which is, I think, the subject of the center today, is the migrants. The migrants, because, I was associated, Mukta, with one Times of India launched a campaign called Lost Vote campaign a few years back as a part of the jury. So where are these lost votes? In fact, when we call about migrants, those who are registered but not at the place of registration, they move to some other place because of marriage, because of job, because of study, like all of you might have done, some of you might have done. I have done in some way. I think that is why I'm not very surprised that one census figure says that it is 45 crores and even 60 crores by this time, because many of us fall into the definition of migrant in some way or the other. But functional migrant in terms of election disenfranchisement is some part of this 300 million. And they have to be enfranchised properly. Technically, they have been given their franchise. They have been registered, and they're supposed to vote. They're supposed to come back to their polling station by beg, borrow, steal, and do that. But that's not human. That's not existential. That's not correct. That's not proper enfranchisement. That is so. Now the big case is, how do we enable these friends of ours, those who, because of the reasons of their life, have moved out of their place of registration? Maybe they're just socially and emotionally connected, but that is also a sort of right. And they don't want, they can't come back by taking a flight or a train, or because they can't afford it. Maybe they can't take chutti. So how this percentage of people, how they are to be brought back, their votes are cast in the place where they are. So the remote voting concept has started. And let me tell you, now recently we had on 16th of this month a meeting in which a preliminary meeting of political parties. I was personally very surprised to find there are more questions than answers to it. I'm sure the answers will evolve gradually. Building takes time. EVM took a lot of time. VVPAT took a lot of time. But even by the question, I thought political parties should be the most excited, because anywhere we go around, as one of the persons who have been associated with election management abroad or in this country, academic institutions, hostels, working places, residential RWAs, oh my God, we are a technology power, we are a IT power, and you are not able to organize remote voting. What primitive thing it is, what disempowering thing it is that you are asking people to come and vote in that polling station. Abusing. And now when it actually starts, immediately as if the whole world is exactly on the opposite side. Why this? Why now? What is the requirement? So we approached with some amount of wisdom, and this definitely helps a lot of citizens who are in a bit of helpless condition. This definitely is pro-election, pro-democracy, pro-rights, and I don't have any doubt about it. Yes, because elections are not only a management of trust, they are also management of distrust. So everyone who is an important stakeholder after voter is the political parties. They all must get convinced that the system which leads to the remote vote, that is very clean and clear, and there is nothing. I think they need to believe, trust, and they must come forward and have a consensus. I think we are at that stage. With this, may I leave the, for the time being, I can come back again if necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ashwini, sir, over to you. I think, I'm just thinking about you. I think you've been sort of sorry, I think everything is. So over to you on first reacting to sir's comments, and also sort of the question that I have, which is on actually the challenges of enumeration, or what preliminary landscape of what challenges we might be facing in doing this.
I will begin on a lighter note.
Yeah,
Banter. I mean, like trained. I mean, temperamentally, I'm a Tocquevillian. So perhaps for me, election is just one facet of democratic experience. And elections are good, elections can be bad also. I mean, like in the volume 2, Tocqueville, long back, I remember teaching also Tocqueville. Also cautioned us about, supra capacity of elections, it could be self-destructive. Back here, coming back, I'm of late thinking about there are multiple ways in which, Kinney has been talking about democracy can suffocate itself. But back here, when I come here and on a serious note, and perhaps, being a student of, Kothari, spend time substantially with Kothari, I'm very happy, delighted. And in the Hindu piece, perhaps I didn't mention it, but elsewhere I'm mentioning one influence legacy from Kothari. The politicization of migrant was one of the hugest democratic deficits that neither political science spoke of it, neither sociologist. Trust me, I'm old enough now, seen 4 decades of academic life, worked with the giants here, including everyone. I don't want to name them, them, all the giants. Nobody told me 20 years back that there is something called migrant. I'm also an Anglophone poet and a writer based in Bombay, and of late I'm struggling with my identity because I'm a migrant in the city. I'm not Arun Kulatkar, Dilip Chitre. So I have suffered on the fringe, both on the literary English space and also in political space. So when I started working on, coming back to the discipline. So if you look at my book, which I edited and co-wrote with Professor Bhagat, invited him because I'm not very good at demography of late. I'm trying to play with demography too. It is again one of the deficits of political science. You go back and pick up any book in political science, 70s, 80s, there is no reference to democracy, political democracy. The one giant was there, Myron Wiener, which we have contested. And I'm happy that my colleagues, including the younger generation, the brightest is sitting here. And I fear the brightest. And because, Myron Wiener was never critiqued, never critiqued. So when we started critiquing, I developed enough confidence to go back and critique Myron Wiener in our book, Migrants, Mobility and Citizenship. In the very opening, started critiquing his idea of territorial ethnicity, where this migrant is coming. The migrant is coming from a sociological normative bias, which is called territorial ethnicity. So unless, coming back to the more policy, what, Sahab has mentioned that, I will come back to that. Before that, I want to give a more, epistemic idea of, what has happened, why in the lockdown, when I was first approached about migrant, I coined two phrases. The first phrase was disenfranchisement and invisibility. Remember, I also work on, I'm a Narega guy. So coming from my Narega days, I worked around, like 200 districts in the country. And if you just pick up, Narega manual, the act, it says in that it will reduce migration, distress migration. I was part of the committee member. I was there in the Narega Council of Prime Minister. So, and then, it started haunting me because as a political scientist, we never ever, considered what Kothari would have said, politicization. So in fact, in Narega committee, I always try to, raise this issue of politicizing migrant, rather than reducing migration. Because my colleague Piradi Shankar, always tells us that migration Ashwini could be good. There is a new approach, it's different from the Marxist and neoclassical approach. It could be a cumulative migrant. You are doing that. Many migrants are doing that. So this is first, let's understand the larger landscape where the Election Commission is going in the discipline, in the epistemic framework of the huge deficit, what I call democratic deficit in the discipline. Arising out of the, the disenfranchisement and invisibility, because you have to combine, what, Akshay Sahab has said, once you start voting, I mean, like, there is a global evidence in migration literature. If you're not voting, you are missing out on everything. And for the welfare benefits, there's a global data all over. Ask refugee, ask immigrants, all over the world. So if you do not have suffrage rights, the concomitant, political, consequences are huge, huge. So I'm not surprised that they are not voting. So second was, and for the migration researcher, I looked at this phrase, little bit of Derridian from, Tocqueville to Derrida. I love Derrida, and Neeraj Chandok used to tell me only Ashwini can read and understand Derrida. So here is Derrida, hospitality and hostility syndrome. That's the new generation of migration literature. You are hospitable to Bombay because you have to, like look at, when I raise this issue of women, migrant, I don't know many of us here have heard about it, met them, Palamuru labor, Palamuru, women. We have tracked and we have substantial information and good evidence, 1.5 lakh. They have never ever voted. Majority of them are women. And you know what they have specialized in? Laying down the cable, the gas which comes to your house. These women have never ever voted. So look at, this hospitality and hostility. Hospitable because you host them, give them work, and you are hostile to them, not in the sense of minor winner, not in the sense of the minor winner. So back here, so these are the two, axes that I have looked at and working on in the new work also coming up shortly in Oxford. So this disenfranchisement, which is de facto, not de jure. Commission knows it, everyone knows it. Every chief who has come, I have worked at least with 7-8 chiefs. Every chief knows that, there is no problem there, nothing. So in fact, let me tell you, if I give you a little more ethnographic, and I could be very honest here, I've been talking about it. And in fact, not me, Jayadi Sahab wrote to the forward and mentioned it, Ashwini just walked into. the room and then sat with me, and I was horrified when they told me the story of 110 million people, temporary migrants, circulatory migrants, or footloose workers. They had read, some of us have read Raymond, who coined the word footloose, but the commission was not aware. Commission was not aware. Commission didn't know anything about it. And after our, conversation over tea and coffee, he told me that, Prof, there is a work for you. And we have been forced to do that work. And you know what was the work? That was the Supreme Court, direction to the commission. And ironically, Supreme Court was considering extending voting rights to NRI, which we also did. Rahul is here and he shared his wisdom and input with us. And we, in fact, our report became the basis for preparing the parliamentary bill also and amending the act. But their journey started. I'm telling you inside story in a Kotharian sense that until now, I had worked in various places, both in the central government and the state government, and part of various committees, including giving award to collectors, all over, going around the country, looking at their innovations. Nobody has seen and looked at migrant as a voter. It's like Amartya's insight, missing women, missing migrant, which is my new work, missing voters or missing migrants. So then we started looking at, prepared a small, report, both the statistical analysis, and we started using the data set. I'm sure that some of you are familiar with Lasani and Bhavnani's work, the last data set, the first data set they used on assembly elections. And Commission was again surprised to see that based on 82 to like 2010 data, and Aditya is not here, he would have given a much better, regression analysis of what he did, and together we analyzed it. The huge deficit here. And we realized, what is called incoming states. There are two phrases you have to remember for the migrants' life, the origin place and the destination place. And the horrific thing from a political science perspective, they were voting neither at the origin nor at the destination. This dual discrimination, I then wrote about dual discrimination. You are not voting anywhere. And why you are not voting? Because there is a conceptual blinder. What is this conceptual blinder? We don't see you. You are invisible. And you are invisible, not in terms of the act, because the act says that if you are an ordinary resident, you vote. And let me tell you, we have worked on sweep, and we did several campaigns with Padma. And but Padma was very sensitive to migrant. She will always, LSR, she also Ladakh migrant to LSR. But jokes apart, so this is the crux of the story. And then commission, and I'm using today also, Jagdish Saab told me that you can use my phrase. I'm like, boss, can I use your phrase when you told me? I said, yeah, you can use. I'm going to CPR and I want to share your phrase. Using like the old phrase, no changes and pro changes. Within the commission, when we presented our report on, inclusive election, which became basis for Election Commission of India to organize internal bureaucratic reform committee, 2016 committee.
I'm politely calling them purists.
Purists.
You are saying them no changes and no changes.
I'm Jadis, I was very honest. So now back here, friends and colleagues here. This report was taken seriously, but not as seriously as my NRI report. NRI report, and I don't want to get into trouble. I would limit there because we also developed, he knows. Yeah, he will respond to that. And so coming here, back here, from there to now, I'm very happy that we did two things. I was working on Aadhaar those days in NRGA. And some of my left-leaning friends opposed me also. They are good friends too, linking Aadhaar to, this is happening because remote voting won't happen technologically. I was put into that committee, Ravindran from our, this is a long story cut short. We started working on remote voting as part of, Australian experience, in Australia, because we have some global, let's admit to the fact that some countries are doing it.
Yeah.
Some country, absentee voter in Australia is a very significant category. You can vote from here. So you are not voting our reason. Coming back to here, and then I will come back about talk about what I call downstream political effects and upstream political
Can we leave
events.
that to the second
Yeah, coming back.
intervention? Because I want Sanjay to. speak.
And there I want to just, those who are pro Asutosh and anti Asutosh, I also want to invite them, because ultimately the piece where I have concluded in the recent research, I'm also looking at inter-ethnic engagement and communal harmony, if you allow migrants to vote. And as per our data, let me give you the data, going beyond Raymond. So we have sufficient information. If we do not have a national sample service, we can identify and tell you there are 110 million temporary migrants or circulatory migrants who are not at all voting. I stop here.
Thank you, sir.
Sorry,
No, not a problem at all.
Yes,
I think
my
that background
passion,
was very, very informative, and sort of the behind the scenes was very informative for all of us who've been, some of us, I think, have just received this thing as news now.
Yeah.
Some people may have been tracking it for some time, so there are all kinds of audiences here. So it was definitely a useful introduction, both of you. Thank you so much. But you talk about this question of not voting at the origin and not voting at the destination. So I wanted to bring Sandeep in on this sort of specific question of informal and unorganized workers at destination. I know that you run a website and आप workers issues के बारे में उसमें काफी लिखते हैं. तो ये जो न्यूज़ है, ये इसको आप कैसे रिसीव करते हैं, या इस प्रक्रिया को from a workers perspective, especially at destination? Because we do a lot of work with unorganized workers, collectives, unions, even CPR has some sort of interaction with them. So I think and these are also the kind of organizations and institutions that the EC will need to at some point of time work with as we socialize ideas like this. So it may be useful to sort of hear what the buzz is there and take it on board as we go along. So
before Sudeep gives very valuable details on that, Sandeep gives valuable details. I'll just supplement conceptually with what Ashwini just now said. Actually, the whole remote voting is, sorry.
ये on.
Now, how can a right be territorial? How can a right be territorial? The problem starts there. If you are wanting to give such an important right, which you started from 1950 onwards, how can it be territorial? I mean, that itself immediately kills the right.
So that
So,
conceptual
now.
that conceptual boundary has been broken with the portability notions now becoming
Yeah.
more accepted, which is why I brought up Unork right in the beginning.
I'm justifying that now.
Absolutely.
He, of course, will more qualified.
Thank you, Mukta, for inviting me to this great discussion. जब लॉकडाउन शुरू हुआ था तो हम लोगों ने सड़कों पर रह करके और उन माइग्रेंट वर्कर्स को मदद की थी, और मदद उस सेंस में कि सिर्फ राशन वगैरह देने का नहीं, बल्कि उनके ट्रांसपोर्टेशन का भी हम लोगों ने काम किया और उनकी रिपोर्टिंग भी की। और उस दौरान जो स्टोरीज हम लोगों के सामने आई वो बहुत ही और सबके सामने आई, तो उसमें सिर्फ यही कहना है, पहली बात तो ये है कि हम लोग workersunity.com जो है, जो सिर्फ लेबर बीट की वेबसाइट है, और लेबर बीट चूंकि मेन स्ट्रीम मीडिया में अब खत्म हो गया है लगभग, या वो सिर्फ क्राइम और लॉ एंड ऑर्डर का ही मसला बन गया है, तो इसलिए हम लोगों ने सोचा कि हम लोगों का एक इकोसिस्टम होना चाहिए लेबर मीडिया का। तो हम लोगों ने शुरू किया, और शुरू से ही ये डिस्कशन रहा है, और तमाम ट्रेड यूनियन लीडर्स से हमारी जब बातचीत होती रही है तो वो इस सवाल को उठाते रहे हैं कि इलेक्टोरल सिस्टम में वर्किंग क्लास और माइग्रेंट वर्कर्स का कहाँ पे प्लेस है, और इस बात को सीरियसली। और मुझे अभी कल एक बहुत ही सीनियर लीडर, जिन फेडरेशन के लीडर थे, ट्रेड यूनियन फेडरेशन के, जिनके अंडर में कम से कम 200 ट्रेड यूनियंस हैं, उनसे जब मेरी बातचीत हुई, हमने कहा कि इस पे आप बताइए कि आप क्या सोचते हैं। बोले कि ये वेलकमिंग एक्ट है ये इलेक्शन कमीशन का, लेकिन उसमें 2-3 चीजें जो कहीं वो शायद मैं आपके सामने रखना चाहूंगा। पहली चीज ये कही कि क्या रिगिंग का जो सवाल है वो हो सकता है क्या, क्योंकि रिमोट मामला है। दूसरी चीज कि जैसे दिल्ली की झुग्गियों में या किसी भी स्लम में जो वर्कर्स होते हैं वो ऑलरेडी वोट कर रहे होते हैं, जैसे दिल्ली की जो गवर्नमेंट बनती है उसमें उनकी बहुत बड़ी भूमिका होती है, इसीलिए जो लोकल बॉडीज होती हैं, लोकल जो गवर्नमेंट्स होती हैं, उनको केयर करती हैं, उनको उनको वाटर सप्लाई करती हैं, उनको इलेक्ट्रिसिटी देती हैं, उनको जितनी भी फैसिलिटीज होती है देती हैं, झुग्गियों में भी जाता है। लेकिन अगर वो इस तरह का अगर वोटिंग राइट उनको मिलता है, तो क्या जो लोकल लेवल पर उनको फैसिलिटी मिलती है, जो उनको राइट्स मिलते हैं, क्या उससे कुछ बार्गेन होगा क्या? ये सवाल उनके दिमाग में था। दूसरी बात ये कि एक और जो सवाल उन्होंने किया वो ये था कि क्या अगर उनको जहाँ पे वो ओरिजिनेट हो रहे हैं, जहाँ पे उनका जन्म हुआ है, यानी जन्मभूमि का अगर सर्टिफिकेट उनको मिल जाता है, तो जहाँ पे वो रिजाइड कर रहे हैं, रह रहे हैं, वहां पे क्या उनका जो हक है, अधिकार है, वो कुछ कम हो जाएगा क्या? यानी कि उनको झुग्गी में रह रहे हैं तो कहा जाएगा कि तुम तो यहाँ पे हो ही नहीं, तो परमानेंटली क्या ये जो स्टेटस है वो खत्म हो जाएगा क्या? तो इसको बहुत सारी चीजें क्लियर करनी चाहिए, जैसा उन्होंने कहा। लेकिन पर्सनली मैं वर्किंग क्लास के लिए पूरी तरह से हम लोग जुटे हुए हैं, हम लोग की टीम जुटी हुई है, संतोष जी हैं, शशि हैं, यहाँ पे आए हुए लोग हैं, हम सभी लोग, तो हम लोग बहुत ही डाई हार्ड किस्म का काम करते हैं। माने हमें कोई फंड और उसकी कोई जरूरत नहीं है, माने हमने कभी उसका फिक्र नहीं किया कभी कि हमें फंड मिलेगा तभी काम करेंगे। और अभी अरुंधति राय ने भी शायद एक मीडिया ऑर्गेनाइजेशन के इनॉग्रेशन में कहा भी कि अगर किसी को किल करना है, किसी को खत्म करना है, तो फंड दे दो। तो खैर हाँ, लेकिन ये स्पिरिट से मेरे कहने का मतलब है, मेरे कहने का मतलब ये है कि इस स्पिरिट से हम लोग काम करते हैं। मेरा पर्सनली मामला ये रहा है कि इलेक्शन कमीशन का ये जो एक्ट है, ये जो काम है, ये बहुत ही वेलकमिंग है। इरोड में 15 हजार वर्कर एक फैक्ट्री में काम करते हैं, और वो एक घेटो है जहां से उनको निकलने का के लिए भी नहीं है। और अभी आपने हाल फिलहाल सुना होगा कि चेन्नई में श्रीपेरुम्बदूर एक इंडस्ट्रियल इलाका है, जिस तरह से दिल्ली के पास में गुड़गांव का, वहां पे फॉक्सकॉन नाम की कंपनी है, जो कि पूरी दुनिया का बहुत बड़ा वो एप्पल फोन जो है, आईफोन को असेंबल करने वाली फैक्ट्री है। वहां पे 20,000 लड़कियों को हॉस्टल में रख करके उनसे काम कराया जाता है, और दे आर नॉट अलाउड टू गो आउटसाइड आफ्टर द वर्किंग आवर। वो उनके हॉस्टल से उनको जाने की इजाजत नहीं है। वो कैसे वोट करेंगे, इस सवाल को जो है इलेक्शन कमीशन को भी वो करना चाहिए, एड्रेस करना चाहिए। जो बॉन्डेड लेबर है, हालांकि सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने कह दिया है कि बॉन्डेड लेबर नाम की कोई चीज नहीं है इस देश में, लेकिन बॉन्डेड लेबर है इस देश में, और उन बॉन्डेड लेबर के राइट्स को कैसे देखा जाएगा, मतलब कुछ सवाल ऐसे हैं जिनको हमें वो कोशिश करना चाहिए। एक तो ये है। दूसरा पहलू, अच्छा ये सारी चीजें मैं उस लिहाज से कह रहा हूं क्योंकि मैं ग्राउंड वर्क की बात कर रहा हूं, क्योंकि ग्राउंड में हम जब जाते हैं, हमने ये देखा है कि वर्कर्स तो ऐसे हैं कि फैक्ट्री में काम करने पर वो फैक्ट्री में उनके साथ क्या ज्यादती हो रही है वो भी नहीं बताते हैं। वो अगर रिपोर्टर्स को नहीं बताते हैं, हम लोग जब जाते हैं तो वो जब प्रोटेस्ट कर रहे होते हैं तभी वो हमसे बात करते हैं, प्रोटेस्ट के अलावा वो कभी बात नहीं करते, वो कोई बाइट नहीं देते हैं। तो वो जो इंटीमेशन है जो वहां पे है, उस सवाल को भी हालांकि ये उसके इलेक्शन कमीशन के दायरे में नहीं आता है, लेकिन फिर भी उस चीज को हमें समझना चाहिए। दूसरी बात है कि मॉरल कोड ऑफ कंडक्ट कैसे लागू होगा उस इलाके में। मान लीजिए कि इरोड में बिहार के 20,000 वर्कर काम कर रहे हैं, तो अगर वहां पे चुनाव होगा तो क्या वहां की फैक्ट्री, मान लीजिए जनरल इलेक्शन में 5 फेज में होना है चुनाव, एक फेज में ईस्टर्न जो स्टेट है उसमें हो रहा है, और उसके वर्कर जो हैं वो तमिलनाडु में है, तो वहां मॉरल जो कोड ऑफ कंडक्ट है वो कैसे लागू करेंगे? दूसरी बात, क्या छुट्टी मिलेगी उनको? क्योंकि इस देश की हकीकत यह है कि 15 से जो 15 अगस्त और 26 जनवरी, कल 26 जनवरी, आप अगर आपको न विश्वास हो तो आप किसी इंडस्ट्रियल इलाके में जाके देखिए, वहां काम हो रहा होगा, वहां छुट्टी नहीं मिलती है, गणतंत्र दिवस है हमारा। तो क्या उस दिन, हालांकि इलेक्शन कमीशन का कहना है कि उस दिन छुट्टी हो, जिस इलाके में इलेक्शन होगा उस इलाके में छुट्टी मिलेगी, लेकिन जिस इलाके में इलेक्शन नहीं हो रहा है और वहां को वोट देना है, वो कौन, कैसे फैक्ट्री ओनर्स को कैसे एक तो देना पड़ेगा ना कि यहाँ पे ये वर्कर्स हैं उनको करना पड़ेगा। तो ये सारी चीजें जो हैं। दूसरी बात, एक और महत्वपूर्ण है, जैसा आप सबने कहा कि एनआरआई के वोटिंग के लिए बात हुई है। थाउजेंड्स माइग्रेंट वर्कर्स गल्फ में काम कर रहे हैं और हर साल कम से कम 2-3 दर्जन बॉडी आती है यहाँ पे। अभी जो अभी लास्ट फुटबॉल वर्ल्ड कप हुआ है, उसको बनाने में पिछले 10 साल में हजारों वर्कर की जान गई है, जिसमें कि इंडिया, बांग्लादेश, नेपाल, बहुत सारे लोग हैं। और माइग्रेशन का तो ये हाल है गल्फ में कि कतर की आबादी 30 लाख है और उसमें माइग्रेंट वर्कर्स या जो माइग्रेंट्स हैं वो 27 लाख हैं। 3 लाख की आबादी है, वहां 27 लाख लोग हैं। तो ये जो चीजें हैं, ये गल्फ में बहुत बड़ी आबादी है ईस्टर्न यूपी की। मैं ईस्टर्न यूपी का हूँ, आजमगढ़ के आसपास का हूँ, और मैं जानता हूँ कि इस पूरे इलाके में माने वेस्ट बिहार और ईस्टर्न यूपी एक बहुत बड़े वर्किंग क्लास के हिस्टोरियन हैं प्रभु महापात्रा, मैं बस इतना कहूंगा। उन्होंने मुझसे ये कहा कि ये माइग्रेशन का दौर 200 साल से चल रहा है। 1897 से लेके 18 के आसपास से ये माइग्रेशन चल रहा है, जिसमें ट्रिनिडाद टोबैगो और मॉरिशस के लोग गए थे। और उस समय का जो माइग्रेशन था वो पूरा इलाका ही माइग्रेंट वर्कर्स का है। जो लखनऊ से आप जाएंगे, लखनऊ और पटना के बीच का जो इलाका है वो माइग्रेंट वर्कर्स का सप्लाई केंद्र हो गया है। और ये अब से नहीं, ये 200 साल से है। पहले ये माइग्रेंट वर्कर्स जो हैं वो रंगून और उस तरफ जाते थे, ट्रिनिडाद टोबैगो और रंगून और बाहर जाते थे और ईस्ट में जाते थे। उनका माइग्रेशन जो है ईस्ट में होता था, कोलकाता जाते थे, बहुत बड़ा सेंटर था। अब जो माइग्रेशन है वो पलट गया है, वो वेस्ट जा रहा है। अब जो सारे माइग्रेंट वर्कर्स हैं वो अब ये जो सूरत और बॉम्बे और ये जो इंडस्ट्रियल कॉरिडोर है गुड़गांव से लेकर के चेन्नई तक का, इसमें कंसंट्रेटेड है। इसमें बहुत बड़े, इस देश में अगर इंडस्ट्री का 70% अगर जीडीपी में अगर कोई इंडस्ट्री जो है वो कर रही है, योगदान दे रही है, तो इस पूरे इंडस्ट्रियल ये बैकबोन है। और यहाँ पे माइग्रेंट वर्कर्स बहुत ज्यादा हैं। तो मेरा ये कहना है कि इन सारे सवालों को, और फिर जब सेकंड राउंड में बात होगी तो मैं कुछ और सवाल रखूंगा, इन सारे सवालों को कंसीडर जो है, हाँ, इसको कंसीडर जो है करना चाहिए। और लेकिन ये वाकई ये जो मूव है वाकई बहुत जरूरी था, बहुत पहले होना चाहिए था और बहुत ही स्वागत योग्य।
थैंक यू संदीप। आई थिंक काफी सारे ऑडियंस के भी कुछ क्वेश्चंस आपने उठा लिए हैं, मैं ऐड कर लूंगी जो क्वेश्चन आंसर्स में आए हैं, पर उससे पहले राहुल आपकी तरफ माइक कर रही हूँ। What do you see as challenges and what do you see as from the perspective of a political scientist? How do you see this?
Okay, thank you, Mukta, and thank you, everyone. So before I go on to the challenges, let me highlight certain things. I've been trained at this, in my master's at this with Ashwini Kumar, and since then he has not left me. We have gone, but in some ways, no. So that has been really helpful because, see, for us academics, one challenge to the wider world is what do you do, you know, in any way informs, shapes the world? What is your contribution to the world? So in that sense, engaging with you on all the works, right from ECI sweep analysis to the 2 reports which we submitted to ECI, at least I can say कि हम कुछ ऐसा भी करते हैं जिससे policy में कुछ काम आता है, थोड़ा बहुत ही, but कुछ contribute करते हैं. It's not just sitting in a room and doing just theory. So couple of things. I think first one, what I would like to say, Indian democracy in 1950 was a leap of faith. Leap of faith against all doomsday predictions. Everyone said India's grand experiment to develop itself as a democracy is surely going to fail. And 75 years later, we can basically say that we have defied all those predictions. So any such move will of course have all sorts of concerns and questions. But if on balance, if any policy is going to bring some good and good to a large section of society, we will have to be ready with that leap of faith. There are always going to be glitches, problems, and it's difficult to basically imagine. आप कोई भी law policy बना लो, once it interacts with societal and political forces, it will produce so many unintended, even negative consequences that you'll have to keep those policies on the way. So you basically prepare a plan, you go with it, and then you keep changing or tweaking it depending upon what sorts of challenges you face. And in that sense, Election Commission is not just one of the most trusted institutions in this country, but it's also one of the most innovative institutions. Last many decades, and especially after 90s, the kind of innovations ECI has done to, bridge the gap of democratic deficit has been commendable. आप दुनिया में किसी भी देश में जाए, like even US, right? तो consequently पे रिपीट है. At least हमारे delimitation पे कोई सवाल नहीं आता उस तरह का, right? In that sense, a very fair institution and has been constantly innovating. कई बार क्या है कि when you are making a policy, जो सबसे अच्छा तरीका होता है, before actually going with the policy, take a dip check. What I think is announcement that we are going to have a provision more at something is a dip check. ये लोग propose करेंगे, सब लोग ये सब खराब है, and in fact, just basically push and positive feedback, it can go into actual policy. अगर किसी के साथ job का साथ काम अभी, ECI does not have a full plan of how more implemented. That is recommendation report. Basically, the first thing was whatever we are going to have, create awareness, right? Awareness creation, awareness. So creating awareness was one of the main things that using this systematic voters education and electoral participation program, we are going to create more awareness that something like this will happen in future. और दूसरी अच्छी बात है that इसका कोई time frame नहीं दिया गया कि कल से आ रहा है, 4 महीने बाद आ रहा है, 6 महीने बाद आ रहा है. All of this will basically, generate some positive feedback loop. There are like lots of challenges, but I think things which we have to think very carefully. Migration data comes from census, right? You can have that from NSS rounds and other things, but the best kind of data, which is still not best, and Kanu and Shamindra, who works a lot on this, can talk more in detail. But whatever I have learned from both of them is like abhi tak hamare census data se at best we can do district level mobility, right? Isse niche abhi hum ja hi nahi sakte. Now, census is delayed. I don't think it's even going to, something which had to start 3 years ago is not going to start before 2024 elections, right? When the process starts, you're not going to have the first cut of data, which is just at the state level before 2026, even if with all the technology. So without that kind of data, I don't think something like this would be implemented. So all what we have on migration is just big picture estimates. We don't have good data to even begin this exercise. The second, as everyone knows about it, nothing to add, which is of course of the definition, and Ashwini sir pointed out in great detail, but I don't, and he actually made a very interesting point about, see, at the end of the day, migrants will recognize as citizens wherever they are voting, right? At the core, this move basically says, if I am a person who's from UP, should I be, and I'm living in Delhi, should I get right to vote in Delhi or should I get right to vote in UP? If I am not, like if I'm not in UP, I'm in Delhi, I want to be treated as a citizen here. And there is now good empirical evidence which is coming out, which shows that just fictitious names, right? अगर मैं किसी वार्ड मेंबर पॉलिटिशियन को ऐसा नाम दूं जिससे लगे कि ये व्यक्ति माइग्रेंट होगा, the politician is less likely to respond to the request of that person. ये तो वोटर ही नहीं है, इस पे क्यों मेहनत खर्च करना, इस पे क्यों समय खर्च करना, right? And so the biggest concern of a migrant is going to be where they need to be educated, where like, so it has to be where ECI, and it's the job of the political parties. Yeah. I think we must also hold political parties sort of accountable here, in democracy, a lot of things which ECI is doing is actually the job of political parties. ECI should be like in classic democracy theory, the job of mobilization is of political parties, not of election commission. The job of election commission is to just play the neutral umpire and ensure there is level playing field. But because political parties and as organizations, they are weak, they are not spending enough efforts and time in mobilization and turnout. Some of this is now being left to the ECI. So rather than, I think, see, having concerns is all right, but we have to be also collectively trying to figure out what the solutions of this, because the intent of being able to include 100 million people who are currently excluded is non-negotiable, right? I don't think anyone can say that नहीं ऐसे चल जाएगा ना, ऐसे नहीं चल सकता. So now we'll have to collectively figure out how to include them. Then there are going to be lots of conceptual challenge, and I'll finish in 100 seconds. One is there, like, there are going to be empowered migrants like Ashwini Kumar, though he may say, "Mujhe poet acha nahi treat kar rahe hain," but there are lots of like his own domestic help would be a different kind of migrant, right? And so you'll have to conceptually think which kind of migrant we are going to like empowerment के लिए किसके लिए ये ज़्यादा होगा. And I think political parties का जो भी concern है, वो largely it comes from the fact that if you start giving migrant right, like voting right to migrant, certain political parties, because they have mobilizational advantages, because they have presence on social media and other things, they will be able to mobilize voters like me, which are more likely to vote for a political party. And right, so in that sense, the smaller parties will basically in the short run feel the heat of it, and it will become in sort of like so the dominant parties will become much more dominant. So that's where the concern they are coming from. And I think as citizens, as election commission, as activists, we'll have to figure out a middle. At the end of the day, all big policy changes require consensus building. It requires time, and we'll have to move in a direction where things can be in the middle. It will not solve all the problem. It will not be able to give solution to all kinds. See, and this is no criticism of what you raised, but just to say, sometimes empirical realities are messy. When you look things on the ground, each story is so unique that there can be no single policy solution. So sometimes policy makers have to abstract out and figure out a solution which should be beneficial to maximum number of people. Rather, of course, the intent and thing should be that it should benefit everyone, but there are always going to be some people left out. And if you try to include everyone, then there is going to be no solution. So as a policy maker is also in a lot of time in this dilemma, what should be the best approach to move forward?
The audio going on. I hope people can still hear. So we've sort of traversed the issue from the idea to the conceptual backing of the idea to the possible implementation challenges. And of course, while completely the point taken that you have to start from somewhere, and that policy has to have, has to first work at the level of agreeing on the intent and then move from there. But operational issues are a reality, especially in the case of migration. And I'll pick up on the bit you said about the different kinds of migrants. And here, I think something that we were discussing just before the panel started, this is a struggle. I mean, policy actors, not just within the government, but in the entire policy space, do not have a very clear sense of what these different kinds of migrants are. They broadly know seasonal circular hote hain, permanent hote hain, rich hote hain, poor hote hain, but it is still not a very clear and very disentangled or a very articulated category in any policy documentation at all. So that is a problem. And the problem then leads to this issue that we broadly call exclusionary urbanization, where voting is only one part of a large number of exclusionary processes that are happening concurrently. So we're talking about social, economic, and political rights, and political rights is something that we haven't perhaps paid a lot of attention to in that sense right now. But where you have, I mean, what was also raised by Sandeep broadly, that jahan pe social or economic rights ka bhi issue hai, like housing ka issue hai, whatever, I mean, basic brass tacks is an issue, then this to migrant workers seems like a very far away kind of thing. So because on ground, they are actually not able to realize rights that are more tangible and what logically should be accessible and should support a basic quality of life. So this becomes so, you know, and I'm talking from, you know, the letter that the EC sent out to the political parties inviting, where, you know, there is this assumption that the processes to do these registrations is simple and accessible, but that is not very clear to migrants, and that does not how it works on the ground. So just sort of how do we talk about political rights to a constituency of people that actually cannot access other very basic and obvious rights? That's one question. And secondly, in this question of, you know, the political parties should also be taking, you know, some of this responsibility and this socialization. I'd also like to sort of throw this open to the panel, that what is that engagement that that migrants currently have at the places that they live politically? If they can't vote, what is the other kinds of political engagements that they currently have? And maybe we should think a little bit about that and then see if political parties are in a position to take this conversation forward or not. So I'll circulate the mic starting from Mr. Raut, and then, you know, we can reflect on.
Yeah. A lot of interesting points have been made. In fact, the questions, the more the questions, the better it is, because questions are beautiful, answers are generally dull. So, so I think all of us in some sense are migrants in this room, different types of migrants.
Yeah.
Some are enjoying the benefits of migrants actually, and some are suffering because of that, but generally. But the only, I think Rahul made the answers even look exciting. I think he answered most of the things which some of you expected me to answer. So, I'm pretty relieved because he could answer it in an exciting manner. So normally the questions are. So okay, I'm just to clear this slate a little bit on the approach that Mukta was talking about, with Election Commission has written a letter. I don't stand for Election Commission, but I'm completely associated with it as a thinking person and as a previous pro, if you call it. So it is focused now for the time being on domestic migrants who are supposed to be 85%. I mean, within the state, people who migrate within the state. I'm just trying to handle one part of it, which is the majority part in a way, quantitatively. I'm not going to the qualitative aspect as yet. And when we started sweep, in fact, I must take responsibility of being one associated with beginning that exercise. It was, I'm responding particularly to Rahul. The politicians are to mobilize. There are two factors which are the total of which is equal to voter turnout, if you say. One is political mobilization, and I would say the management factors. So management took up the task of mobilizing more in the nature of facilitation, actually, in the consciously about a decade and more back, when I think Ashwini ji and Rahul were associated with us in the beginning of that time. And we have traveled a good distance and for a good cause. And that is called sweep, systematic voters education and electoral participation. And a part of it is celebration of National Voters Day today, which is it, okay, where we all went. So I don't think that beyond the political parties, particularly when they are not doing a great job on this, or at least doing a motivated job, we can, Election Commission of India or friends like all of us sitting here, we can disown the responsibility of mobilizing the people. We should, and we are doing it hopefully. And बाकी छोटे-छोटे जो सवाल आए हैं, मैं उसका दो लाइन में जवाब दे देता हूं, क्योंकि नहीं तो फिर लंबा बातें हो जाएगा, टाइम ही खत्म होने वाला है. जब तक so far as this territorial thing is a problem, and the politicization of migrant, which I think that's a very strong argument. The migrant, see what has happened, I don't know. I mean, because this is a very thinking organization, and a lot of you do incisive studies on this. Political parties have increasingly taken women's agenda over the last 10 years. When they saw that women turnout has increased because of the so-called mobilization which we did, which we should not. I mean, so the women's turnout in a single stroke in 2014 national election, it was breached to the extent of becoming only 1.4% from 6% gap, and now it improved marginally to become higher than the men in 2019. Okay, so that is why all the political parties are proactively taking up women's agenda. I hope the same happens with urban youth, and particularly now today's context, the migrants. And I'm sure that political parties, being intelligent that they are in their own pursuits, they will find a way to take the migrants' agendas. Okay, in a politically motivated way, it doesn't matter because it's all a political business in any case. So I think it will happen. And two small questions which Sandeep ji has raised, I'll just answer to this. And Election Commission is not the panacea for everything. We are forgetting that Election Commission's under Article 324, its only role is to maintain electoral roll and conduct free and fair election on time. That's it. But we are giving an impression that for all socio-political and existential situations, the Election Commission will have a solution. Kindly, this is a little overestimating Election Commission. It's a very limited professional organization. It's a very limited, and it is many times exceeding, like many organs of the state are always exceeding. Yeah. So Election Commission has been forced to exceed a little bit and move into other area because there is a shortfall somewhere. Okay. Now, rigging, one thing. He mentioned the word rigging, and that could be a genuine problem and genuine apprehension. I started saying it is management of distrust also. The present, I think it's a little too early to talk about it because, as Rahul very rightly mentioned, it is now opens up to many questions, and now there will be positive inputs, and that will strengthen any regular policy. But on the draft as of today, EVM is a regular. RVM, the remote voting machine, is a regular EVM, only with the dynamism to accommodate more constituencies. And it is exactly the standalone, not networked, all the qualities which make EVM invincible, though some losers sometimes may still talk about it, but that is old poetry. It will keep happening for, So RVM follows the same method. So RVM is nothing. And he also mentioned how to enforce the MCC on this. Yes, that's a challenge, but that's a challenge which will definitely have its checks and balances like Election Commission does. It has to be towards everyone's satisfaction, how the model code is also enforced in this. And he was talking about whether what will happen. Those are very beautiful and relevant questions. How do the migrants who are already on the slum? I think independence or freedom matters. A migrant should have the freedom to register and vote there where he has come to, or to go and vote for his village. And I'm sure political parties will build their agenda accordingly. And the migrant will also respond accordingly in terms of his bargaining power. It is presently, as we discussed initially, it looks complicated, but I'm sure it is going to fall in place sometime. People and the potential voters will be known to the political agent, and then they will respond to each other's bargaining as such. So that will be a differentiation between those who are staying in the slums. All are staying in slums, but connected, say, with Delhi politics, Delhi agenda, Delhi school, Delhi health scheme, and some who still relate to something in, some Muzaffarpur or somewhere. So I think this is choice that is to be given. This is a very powerful choice. I am looking at it as of today. So there is, they cannot be asked to disown a particular place. Then we'll go back to the problem which was talking. Right is not territorial. This franchise is not just territorial, because that means you are constraining the right. You're not but in this, going back to rigging a little bit, Election Commission of India or any election manager anywhere in the world, secrecy, security, transparency, these are some original, most required virtues of election management. These cannot be compromised. Come this technology or that technology. And we have milestone, we are just discussing technology, but rigging is not only model code he raised one, then we have to have a lot of changes in the conduct of election rules, Representation of the People's Act, hugely sharp definition of migrant for this purpose, about which political parties are concerned. I'll tell you some interesting story. When we started the sweep, I don't know how many of you know this, we started mobilizing the votes in the slum areas. Then some political parties said, why you are mobilizing here? This will help X party. I said, boy, because these people are disenfranchised. They don't vote. They don't have card. We have to. He said, no, there is a motive because X and Y party are going to benefit from slum votes. Then we go to RWA, Resident Welfare Association, some other. No, resident welfare associations in towns, they vote in particular manner.
Yeah.
So you are mobilizing, that means they will help a particular party.
Yeah.
There is no end to distrust. There is no end to distrust if you do like this. So we are just trying to go to dry areas and make sure that there is some rain there. That is what, from a policy approach, I is saying that, we can only go work for a larger cause. We can't look at exceptions, but still there will be questions and questions. Maybe questions strengthen us. Sometimes questions may halt us, may obstruct us. So this is and NRIs. I'm little NRI movement. In fact, now it has subsided in terms of migrants. They are international migrants. I am excluding the Gulf people from that because they have a situation, and he was talking about how the dead bodies are coming. But there has been a Western lobby also that in the other countries, very rich and affluent class, that they should press an internet button and then they vote. But I think Commission and all of us together rightly focused on the domestic migrant issue first. I think they are I don't think that can be more fashionable for an NRI who is in a superstar situation, or it's a good, if it happens to include them, it's very fine. But if we're talking about the priority, so I think we're definitely talking about the friends who are not been franchised. And he also mentioned about the chutti aspect. I mean, coincidentally, those who get chutti don't vote, and those who want to vote, they don't get chutti.
Yes.
I have gone around Himachal Pradesh in some hotels, in all those beautiful locations. There are hotels where there are workers from all places. They don't. And this chutti wutti, all these orders, etc., is one thing. But because if anyone wants to deceive, the thief always walks faster than the police. That's why I think they run faster than the police. So I said, okay, do one thing, at least stagger, and then let the people go and vote, and then come back. So I tried to make it enforceable, but definitely they should get wherever they are remotely. If they are voting for their constituency back in Bihar or back in Gujarat or back in Odisha or somewhere, they must get a chutti for that. And there is already a fear. I think Rahul made that point or something, or maybe together, that there will be some advantage to parties who can really buy up these votes in a particular location. And that is truly some of the fears of some small parties somewhere. But there is also some type of, actually political parties, a lot of them are confused at this stage. Whether this vote, their final objective is this vote coming to me or not? Is this vote, they are not able to find a clear answer to this as yet. They're not so their interest is this vote coming to me or not? If they look at, okay, these are poor, downtrodden, maybe they are coming, okay, they may vote for me. But then they're saying that someone will buy them up there, or there will be mastans who will be force them. But it is Election Commission of India's responsibility to make sure that the secrecy and security, then the sanctity of vote, exactly in the polling station scenario, will have to be done. Like, I'll give you a small example. Very recently, 80 plus and PWD voters are being given voting right from homes. It's a big thing if you think of. And some other country, our EMB partners are saying this is too much. I mean, you are spoiling them. If they are democratic conscious, they should come and walk and vote. When you are now going to do all sorts of things now. And now from 80, there is a demand. Why not 75? Why not 60? So everyone has to vote from home. You should vote from here. So what is this? Is this anyway democracy? But okay, there is one step taken for the 80 plus and the PWD voters, and it is mind-boggling amount of work. I call it polling before polling. I was special observer in Gujarat and Himachal. People are climbing mountains for one vote to be collected from home of a voter who is sitting there. And all polling station situation has to be enacted there. Police, political agents, secrecy, and even that dibba around him where he will vote. And all this for one voter in his or her home on a mountaintop somewhere. And the people are going. So it's a mind-boggling amount of exercise.
It's a miracle.
And so how much you can go, how much resources you have go, and democracy to that extent is understood in this way is very expensive. So these are I thought I'll try to give my little answers to whatever was mentioned. I think I'll stay here. Yeah.
Should we open this up before we, comment, because I think then we'll get more comments on the table. So there have been some questions online, but most of them have sort of been answered as part of the conversation. So I'll open it up to the room here to those physically present. So Shumindra, we can start with you, and let me try and give you one of the microphones.
Yeah, thank you very much for, it was quite enriching for someone who does not really work with politics and migration. I have three questions specific. The first question comes from the ECI letter that's been sent to political parties. I have gone through it, and it's very interesting to see that one of the main vertical that ECI points out is a desirability to vote. And from there, the debate starts that why remote voting and not flexible voting, all sorts of stuff. Thus, coming back to a point of territorial limitation to this thing. I'm asking this question that why the discussion starting from remote voting, does the ECI has sufficient evidence that migrants wants to vote back to their source states rather than destinations? I'm asking also, sir, you are also there. ECI has numbers on how much people change their constituencies, right? From one constituency to another. That number is available with them. So any structural analysis based on that has been done. From that, this has been opined that vote should be remote and to the source. So where from this idea of remote voting usually coming from? Because this is important to my friend, because this leads to all the secondary questions that's coming, then define the degree of remoteness and going ahead the application problems. The second question is coming from any formal attempt ECI has ever made to tackle the number game, what Rahul was pointing out. Is Census and Election Commission of India are two organizations. No. So the reason I'm asking this, because Census and Election Commission of India are two organizations which actually totally counts. I mean, it's 18 plus, but there are numbers available, how many persons are in situ, how many persons are voted. So I think this is important because the catchment of the voting is very important. I mean, I was reading somewhere the later, you have 72 constituencies, one RVM can actually serve. So coming back to a more constituency wise estimate from those numbers would be very beneficial. And is there any way to exploit this kind of methods to look at that? My third question is regarding the gender story. You also pointed out migration voting will have impact on gendered votes, because a lot of voters are females. My female migration is mostly marriage migration and the story. So what are the expectation? And this is not the ECI process. This is more of a general question, that what kind of change do we think in terms of gendered voting if migration voting actually comes into place? These are the three questions I had. Thanks.
Thanks. That was a really fascinating talk. So, I think I just want to come back to the whole issue of source and destination that we keep talking about. And typically, these are circular migrants. They're working for large part in the urban and going back to rural. A majority are also rural circular migrants. So how do we know that, fine, remote voting is all fine, but these are people who've been working in the city for 10, 15, 20, 30 years, right? Hmm.
It's 6 months, 3 months, 4 months.
Yeah.
So the number that we have estimated is 110 million. 110 million people are mobile, on foot mobile.
Yeah.
If you exceed in Maharashtra 5 years, so then I want to just clarify to everyone, there is a domicile category. Tariq Thechal has done a pioneering work with Adam Arvak. You must read. It's called Competence Politics in Dharavi. That will take care of some of the large confusions that these political parties have. We are not concerned with the slum lords or slum dogs here. No, we are not concerned with the domicile. We are only concerned ECI within the internal document, inclusive election, which refers to people who are Palamarur kind. The Mahbub Nagar women, they are not voting because they are not at one place for more than 3 months, 4 months.
Yeah, but people who are
So they
also,
wanted to get
yes,
it.
yes. So these
So-
are, you're talking about the short-term circular, but you also have long-term circular migrants, right? They are typically politically excluded as well, you know, so people who have like, who live in, who have homes in the rural areas, people who have homes in the rural areas, their families in the rural areas, but they might be working in the urban areas for a larger part of their lives, right? So these are also circular migrants and they are long-term circular. No, eventually they will go back to the village to retire and so forth, right? So this applies to seasonal and short-term migrants as well. So the whole political exclusion which is happening at destination, one also feels perhaps that this whole idea of remote voting does not allow them the choice of exercising their political choice at destination. So what is the relationship between the remote voting in the rural and at destination? And I want to refer to the workers you were referring to, the Foxconn workers who are working in, they are pretty much in neo-bonded situations, educated workers, right? Their relationship will be very different from someone who's living in the slum, has some element of political agency, but may still not be voting, right? So I think the diversity of migrants also makes a lot of difference in this case. Yeah.
Regarding the remote voting and the method that will be used for remote voting and the incidence of fraudulent voting, which is very prominent in India. We all know, everywhere else. And it happens mostly in the case of migrants, both at the place of origin and destination in different ways. Since I come from Eastern UP, Balia, and I come from a political family, and every election time, we would be asked to go home and help with the voting process. And every household's list used to be with our family. My uncle was a politician. How many migrants have gone out and their votes were casted in village. Different people will dress up in different ways. I don't know, election card, they will be asked not to look at. एक फिंगर में निशान लगाया, फिर दूसरे में भी लगता था, फिर तीसरे में भी लगता था, सारे वोट पड़ते थे. तो रिमोट वोटिंग में और फिर फ्रॉडुलेंट वोटिंग का क्या होगा, जरा मुझे कोई बताए प्लीज.
Just add on and then we won't take any more because.
Hi, so my question pertains to the new forms of bonded labor, where migrant laborers are like enforced to be stay in camps and like mines. So how do they? No. Yeah. So how does these remote voting overcome these challenges where laborers are not allowed to move out of the camps?
Okay, let's take responses before we.
राव साहब हमारे मैं एक बात बताऊं, मुझे कुछ कहना है. वो एक गाना था ना कि दिल की बात कह रहे हो, मन की बात आजकल नहीं बोलता है. Sorry, I'm Derridian, sir. Pehले, yeah, I think some of the things I thought that Rahul will flag it. I mean, like we have been working 10 years back. Any book you pick up, any index, nothing, no migrant, nothing. Political science, there is no migrant, nothing. Now the question is here. So I live in Maharashtra, and Maharashtra, the classic Maran winner politics. Shiv Sena, I was almost lynched. Almost, I remember, I survived Maja Marathi Sudha Nahi Aaye because I had a Marathi newspaper, and I was in a bus. I told him, Rahul, times are bad here, so carry a Marathi newspaper. Those days were MNS days. और ये फिराक विराक में सर क्या है, फिराक उर्दू बोलेंगे हमने के गए. So we have seen Amrita, मतलब those days. And there is a funny rule here because we work also with cab drivers, taxi drivers, their unions. Balasaheb Thackeray developed a very innovative strategy. So he developed this category, unconstitutional category of using domicile voters. आपको मैं कह रहा हूं बॉम्बे का BMC चुनाव में these domicile voters are going to play a large role. Whether BJP is going to be a critical party in future or not. So domiciles are not part of the entire our inclusive business. They're already voters. And different states have different rules. Haryana has different rule, Madhya Pradesh different, Telangana different. So domiciles are taken care of, where the Adam Arbak and Tariq Thechal have done brilliant work, For insight like political scientists, what do we get from Adam Arbak's work on, what is called second generation entrepreneurial migrants? I tell you, friends and colleagues, there is a large literature coming up in terms of entrepreneurial migrants. We are not concerned about entrepreneurial migrants. We are concerned about in the paper forthcoming. I'm raising the issue of Ambedkar's insight. If Ambedkar were around, he would have loved and congratulated ECI. Because if you look at our data, our data is compiled from various sources, triangulating the data, large numbers of circulatory, or the temporary or footloads belonging to Dalits and tribals. And this is where the political parties are making cardinal sin, I would call, very strong term. They're making cardinal sin. The CPI must go back home, CPI must go back home and not unleash, injustice on Ambedkar's constituency. This is something is hidden in this remote voting. So we are concerned about largely, like when Jayadi Saab started the process within Election Commission, the pro changer versus no changer, the agenda was to, trigger it, push it, as Rahul rightly said. We didn't even know and we didn't even recommend that you just go, we just mentioned pilot karte nahi, Rahul, and build a national data set also. The national data. We were also trying to fudge, a little bit here and there, the issue, so that, our issue can be accepted within the bureaucratic labyrinth of the ECI. See, sorry, Rahul Saab, but ECI, despite its best intention, we have now global research correlating that large numbers of migrants, not here, but Brazil, the second book we are working on, ballots and migrants, all over the world, Latin America and Africa, they suffer political exclusion, not because of anything, because of the bureaucratic barriers. Bureaucratic barriers. And the bureaucratic barriers are largely erected, sustained by last mile electoral managers, not by Rahul Saab. Not by Rahul Saab. I worked with them last mile, and last mile is a huge problem. What we recommended, what we suggested to Election Commission, let's go for remote voting. If you go for remote voting, the quick answer, I think Gaikwad and Nellis recently supported that idea and cited our work, that this is where you can tackle the issue of registration and the process of, bureaucratic hassles. So my humble submission to all of you, to understand that there can never be, I think, in fact, Priya has done, the Sinkar has done, excellent work on why census is not reliable for us. I have written about it. Why census is not reliable. Look at, have you looked at census questionnaire? There is no way you can track circulatory or temporary migrant. How do we track them? NSO, same problem everywhere.
I'll try to answer you.
No, just to clarify this.
So let me summarize and rest now. Rest in peace. Finally, I would like to say something which I haven't said. We have also looked at, a typology, tentative typology, I guess, done by Sridharan. Brilliant work Sridharan is doing, but still work in progress, where we are looking at how these political parties, I was surprised that Congress was leading that, the campaign against remote voting, because our estimation, political understanding is based on Weiner's insight and several other studies, Fujimaro and other studies we have looked at globally. It's not just our study, India's experience, that how would ethno-nationalist party would respond to EVM? How would regional parties like Nitish Kumar, JD or RJD would respond? How would catch-all parties would respond? This is for Rahul, to look at in terms of psephology, look at in terms of voters, turnout, numbers, and electoral outcomes. So we have some idea. I won't say that it's a very substantive idea, but we have developed a typology. I have indicated elsewhere, in a small way, that how these catch-all parties ideally should go with the EVM and develop differentiated, what we call differentiated political strategy to make investment into migrants into a political resource. Right now, at both places, origin place and the destination place, migrants are not considered political resource. In fact, I quote from one survey, ethnographic work, that migrants are uncertain quantity. I mean, like they're not reliable. I mean, like from the political party's perspective. I stop here. Rao sir.
Yeah, so perhaps I have lost track of quite a few questions. I'll try to answer some, and if someone can remind, and thanks for exempting me from the bureaucratic lethargy. So thanks for the time being, and though I have ceased to be a bureaucrat for a while now. So, we have a relationship with census. I'm so far as the Election Commission of Database, but the Election Commission of Database is largely concerned about electorate, as you had rightly said, which today, as of the fresh from the oven, it is 94.5 crores today, the electorate. And because it is typically, in my estimate, I mean, I have sat down with others from time to time, it is about 66% of the overall population, considering that is the population which is typically, it should be 18 and above. And there is a population growth rate of 2%, which added, then it is, for example, this year, 18 to 19, in the last 1 year, they have added 1.43 crores, 18 to 19, which is called newly eligible voters, which have changed a different complexion, which we did not talk about. That's a great enhancer, actually, 4 times cutoff. Earlier, I mean, 18 plus above is fine, but you have to wait till January 1st. Now you don't have to. That's a big thing for I think after 21 to 18, the reduction of the voting age, which I consider as a revolution in terms of enhancing the whole participatory democracy. This is big one. This has not been talked about that much. The registration of 4 cutoff dates, it's really big, and the results are already showing. I hope it connects the youth a little more. Now, and there is a connected question on which Ashwini partly reflected. The domicile is nothing related. There is a phrase called ordinarily resident.
Yeah.
The ordinarily resident is nothing collected. In fact, in case of Jammu and Kashmir, there has been a huge furor raised on this, but there is no need of a furor. It is that the domicile was unnecessarily brought to the table. The actual thing is ordinarily resident. In fact, people who do not have a residence are on flyovers. If they are consistently seen to be residing in a particular area, they are taken in onto the electoral roll. That's a very interesting aspect, and a very little bit of, that is why, on the negative side, it becomes the territorial side. On so that now for remote voting, the challenge will be ordinarily resident, temporarily absent. Now I'm answering the question of who is our friend. What's her name? Amrita. Amrita, you were talking about, I spent some time in South Gujarat recently in the tribal areas. Most of the tribal families, they move over to Surat. They are migrant labor, actually. And they again come back in their season. In the particular season, they come back, the other season, they go back. They go for 2 reasons. One is textile, one is crushing of the sugarcane. So their votes, very interestingly, some political parties, because the distance is not too much. Yeah. It's not another part of the state or different state. So the parties who know that these are the migrants who will vote, or at least in the anticipation, they ferry them back on the polling day. But they don't ferry those who they don't politically depend on, or who will not listen to them, or it is very sketchy. So one of the purposes of remote voting is also to enable that their votes are able to, they go on if they don't go, they will not earn. Why? They will lose their money. So they go for that. And so all types of, the domicile is not an issue. The ordinary resident, that definition has to be further sharpened even in the context of remote voting. Yeah. And the temporary absence has to be also. Now I'm coming to our friend from Balia, the political family. So naturally the political questions. So more than the 6 questions which you have in mind, the Election Commission has 60 questions in mind. How to stop fraud in this. So because you know it is just like चोरी हो रहा है तो क्या करें, चोरी हो रहा है तो चोरी पकड़ेंगे, फिर उसको जेल में डालेंगे. So these are the simple manner. If I want to answer in a very blunt manner, so there has to be the remote voter, the migrant has to apply to be included in this list in the constituency in which is registered. The RO there will first take into account that this is my voter registered here, has migrated to Surat, and so we'll have to include and enable him or her. That's one. Then there will be super identification. I think the identification which happens normally for normal voters, these people will suffer more in terms of identifying themselves. I think this is, and I'm going back to Rahul, that it's a work in progress. Whatever we are discussing here is on some draft ideas, but this will, when it finally transfers to a particular thing, ये जो इलेक्शन कमीशन ना ये जो फूंक फूंक कर पांव रखने वाली बात है, ये तो बार बार, because we have seen the whole story of EVM, and now this is, and after that, how to capture this is a voting process. 72 is just one idea. There will be because the machine can only take that much. There will be another machine which will take another, because the constitution could be more in a state. Many states it's more. And then after that, how to transfer the vote back after it is recorded in the control unit in a safe corridor to the RO of the original place. So these are all, I mean, very easier said than done. It is going to be, and at every point of time, as you said, it has to be no fraudulent thing can be done. That has to be ensured. So this is a long haul. This is a really long haul. That is why that the beginning has been made, and that is why they call it prototype. The prototype will be introduced and the beginning has been made. But I think it has to go through a lot of, and good thing is that in my understanding and my knowledge, a lot of good eminent scientists who are associated with this. Okay, so it is, they are the best in the country. I mean, IIT, Indian Institute of Science and all that, they are backing up the election commission on this. So, and then all the law and other things will be taken care of. So this will happen in that way. And when it is going to happen, finally, but this will be a big boon for the migrants, and so that they are into the political agenda, both as per their choice at the place where they are or the place of their origin. I think maybe the politicians of both the places will give attention to that, to them. That can be a good consequence. That can be a good consequence of it. That can be a good consequence. Is there any other questions which I did not address? I think particularly our friend in the corner there.
You can write back to him also.
Like, did I not answer any question? Would you like me to? Okay, because I just lost track.
One is statistical question, answer करेंगे अलग से.
We can have
We can have. I will answer your data question अलग से.
I will give Sandeep.
मेरा सवाल नहीं है, नहीं ना सवाल है और ना ही जवाब है, सुझाव है इलेक्शन कमीशन को कि thousands million dollar रेमिटेंस में आता है गल्फ कंट्रीज से, फ्रॉम माइग्रेंट वर्कर्स से, तो इसको जो है उनको केयर करना चाहिए.
काम किया है.
हाँ, तो उसको ध्यान रखना चाहिए.
वेबसाइट बनाया था इन्होंने.
हाँ, दूसरी बात यह है कि हमें जैसे डुअल सिटीजनशिप होती है, NRI के पास होती है, तो अच्छा इंडिया में नहीं होती, कहीं और होती है, लेकिन यहाँ पे तो उस तरह का भी क्योंकि एक जो है माइग्रेंट, जैसा वो सर्कुलेटरी माइग्रेंट वर्कर्स के बारे में कह रहे थे, मैं ऐसे कई फैमिलीज को और कई सारे माइग्रेंट वर्कर्स को जानता हूं जो कभी चेन्नई में काम कर रहे हैं, कभी मुंबई में काम कर रहे हैं, कभी गुड़गांव में आके काम कर रहे हैं. उनके लिए बड़ा तो उनके लिए कुछ चीजें करनी चाहिए, ये बहुत ही इंपॉर्टेंट चीज है. और लेकिन जो सबसे लास्ट चीज है कि ये बहुत ही वेलकमिंग मूव है इलेक्शन कमीशन का, और मेरा जो है तो ये बहुत जरूरी काम है, ये बहुत जरूरी काम है, और इसको वाकई जैसा राहुल जी ने कहा, हाँ नहीं राहुल जी ने जो बात कही कि
आ रहा है बार-बार,
but I don't think सर
थोड़ी छोटी टिप्पणी.
हाँ, मैं तो छोटे में ही काम चलाने वाला एकदम. Though so the reason I didn't go into your question on challenges, I think that was well covered, and that's but now like as academics we are trained to only look for Dag and Dabba in Chand also, right? So But sometimes you have to also think of what the positive outcomes could be. Second point on, he's absolutely right about when we were doing that NRI voting rights project, we also had a competition attached to that, which is just to encourage people to participate. Because वो questionnaire था, लोग questionnaire बिना किसी incentive के नहीं भरते. Actually, there was much more participation from the Gulf than from the US and other places to fill that questionnaire. And it's generally like, what is different about our democracy or perhaps other democracies in the colonial world compared to the Western world, that the poor in India is much more enthusiastic about politics. Perhaps a lot depend on the state and politics for their well-being. So anything which is related to politics, they are much more likely to be enthusiastic. Last point, I think, see, every big move, in some ways, as Raut Sahib rightly pointed out, from election commission's intent is to basically increase the quotient of democracy, right? Increasing secrecy, sanctity, and other things. Just to give you an example, 1998 में जब EVM इंट्रोड्यूस हुआ था, उसके बाद जो सबसे मतलब बड़ी चीज हुई थी, इनवैलिड वोट्स बेसिकली बिकेम ऑलमोस्ट नेग्लिजिबल. उससे पहले क्या होता था कि एटलीस्ट मतलब किसी भी कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंसी में जहां पे 40,000 वोटर हैं, कम से कम 1,500 से 2,000 वोट इनवैलिड हो जाते थे. एंड वुड if someone gets this data, my guess would be lot of invalid vote was actually from the bottom half of the society. Women, those who were not literate, they were more likely to make the mistake. Older people, कि ink कहाँ लगाना है, उसको कैसे fold करना है, और वो votes invalid हो जाते थे. EVM actually in some ways enfranchised that constituency, and the evidence coming from Brazil and India is this basically just 98 के cutoff के बाद मतलब हेल्थ आउटकम्स और इन सब चीजों पे, क्योंकि आप डिमांड ज्यादा कर सकते हैं ना वो कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंट. सो आई थिंक इवन दिस मूव व्हिच विल टेक टाइम, सो फ्रॉडलेंट वोट्स में अब पहले से ही बहुत कमी आई है फॉर वैरायटी ऑफ रीजंस व्हिच EC इंश्योर्ड, राइट? इन लास्ट 20-30 इयर्स अगर जो चीजें पॉसिबल थी जो पुष्पा जी बता रही हैं, मतलब उसमें बहुत कमी आ गई है. बट दिस इज नॉट टू से कि कहीं भी फ्रॉडलेंट नहीं होता, कुछ भी नहीं होता, ये होता है, राइट? एंड आई थिंक अ मूव लाइक दिस, बेसिकली क्यों लोग फ्रॉड वोट करते हैं? क्योंकि माइग्रेंट नहीं वोट कर रहा है, राइट? तो उसके स्थान पे लोग वोट कर दे रहे हैं. दिस काइंड ऑफ थिंग इज एक्चुअली गोइंग टू ब्रिंग फ्रॉडलेंट वोट्स फर्दर डाउन if there is something like that. This is not to say कि that problem will never exist, right? मतलब जितने भी नेगेटिव इवल्स है सोसाइटी में, वो हमेशा रहेंगे, right? Because there are going to be smart people to figure out how the rules and laws can be bypassed. And there are all, and those are very, very smart people, right? Because they are thinking one step ahead of you. You bring a law, they have figured out a loophole. And so our job as someone like, you know, the people who are trying to ensure things improve, will also have to think fast and in future. तो आज जो आपको लग रहा है कि कैसे करोगे रिमोट वोटिंग, इतना कॉम्प्लेक्स है ये सब, यू हैव टू आल्सो थिंक हाउ टेक्नोलॉजी इज फास्ट. अभी चैट जीपीटी पूरा डिसर्टेशन लिख सकता है, पिछले 10 दिनों में आया ना, राइट? सो यू टू थिंक हाउ टेक्नोलॉजी इन 6 or 8 years, बाय द टाइम वी बिकम रेडी फॉर दिस, विल आल्सो इंप्रूव, right? And so we'll have to be futuristic when you are thinking of policy, not in the past.
एक सवाल आपसे ये पूछना था कि क्या ट्रेड यूनियंस को स्टेक होल्डर आप तमाम कहें, क्या इससे यह माना जा सकता है इस पूरे प्रोसेस में, क्योंकि वो बहुत ऑर्गेनाइज कर रहे हैं, बहुत सारे एनजीओज हैं जो माइग्रेंट वर्कर्स के बीच में काम कर रहे हैं, उनके साथ मिलकर.
No, I think my personal opinion is, and to the extent whenever I get associated with this, I think these are important stakeholders, because the Election Commission of late, and I hope in the past as well, has believed in a lot of consultative process, and a consultation to mature this particular provision begins, and that will definitely have the trade unions as a part of the consultation. Because you represent the workers.
Thank you, sir. I think we should wind up, and I'm sorry for people on Zoom whose questions were not directly addressed, but we have to remember that we are at a very nascent stage in this conversation. So all of this was throwing a lot of ideas out there and clearing a lot of preliminary doubts. So there is a lot of confusion in everybody's mind, and slowly we will move towards some sort of solution, or a lot of piloting, lot of experiments will need to happen. So let's just remember that we had this conversation here today, and let's check back on this issue in some time when, some concrete piloting steps are taken. Meanwhile, I think this is a very rich set of researchers, thinkers, people from many different walks of life who can contribute to that consultative process. So, लिखें, पढ़ें, engage करें इस issue के साथ, and let's say all educate ourselves a lot more than we have till now, because this is going to happen sooner than later, and it's an important conversation both from a citizenship angle and of course for Indian democracy. So thank you very much for being with us here today. Thank you, extra thank you to the panelists, and both to Professor Ashwini and Mr. Raut for answering a lot of technical and detailed questions today, and sort of expanding the horizons of everyone who's been here. And thank you also very much to Sandeep and Rahul for your comments. Thank you.